Modern complex financial instruments. We've heard a lot about this in the news, but things like mortgage-backed securities, credit default swaps. Some people say that government enables these markets, but actually you've got a system of private rules and regulations to oversee them. So the International Swaps and Derivatives Association, ISDA, when a bond is in default and it needs, say you have insurance on that bond, the equivalent of insurance, a credit default swap, and you're owed money from the equivalent of the insurer. You go to ISDA, and ISDA will figure out what you're owed. They'll have an auction of the bond on default, say it's supposed to be worth $1, but it's only worth 10 cents. They'll say, oh, you need to get paid 90 cents. So when Fannie Mac and Freddie Mae had their credit event, when they were nationalized, there was tons and tons of these contracts, and people are like, what are we going to do? There's never had a credit default swap event as large as this. ISDA oversaw it privately, and it actually functioned amazingly well. So you've got these modern contracts which rely on this. Also, a neat thing that these people do is you could have any type of contract imaginable, and before these rules, you'd have to hire a lot of lawyers to figure out how do we want to do things. And what these people do is have off-the-shelf rules that say, hey, let's just follow the ISDA rules. And once you follow the ISDA rules, it makes things a lot more simple. All right, so let me start wrapping up, and then we can open it up for questions. So why do markets create rules? Why do all of these people create rules in these markets? Well, I'm an economist, so I need to show you these things. Marginal cost, marginal benefits. We can think about marginal benefits of rules, and we can have these slopes in any way we want. But just imagine there's decreasing marginal benefits of rules. So some rules are good, but there's decreasing marginal benefits. There's increasing marginal costs. However these curves look, you, as a stock exchange, have the ability to evaluate, are rules going to help investors? If the New York Stock Exchange has too many rules and they're too costly, is that going to help investors or turn investors away? Or if they have too few rules, is that going to scare away investors because they don't have assurances? So we can think about the exchange as competing for business. New York Stock Exchange competing with NASDAQ, competing with the London Stock Exchange, competing with other investment markets. Each of these investment markets has an incentive to adopt the optimal number of rules. Weigh the marginal benefits and the marginal cost. Pick the number of rules that maximize value to potential investors. We can think about this in lots of other markets as well, in things like Amazon, eBay. They have private rules and regulations. If you have a dispute, you can call these people. Those parties are competing for your money, and they have an incentive to make sure you are happy. Now, the question I have is, government regulators, do they have an incentive to weigh the marginal costs and marginal benefits of the rules? They don't face the same market incentives, and I will suggest they often implement rules with very little value. So to sum up, government throughout history has kind of always viewed stock markets suspiciously as forms of gambling, and they didn't enforce contracts in most of the markets for most contracts, most sophisticated contracts. Nevertheless, people continued to trade anyway, and they developed very sophisticated trading instruments. Forward contracts, short sales, options, all developed not because of the law, but in spite of the law. When market participants see there's a potential problem, they have an incentive to figure out solutions. And when they see that private rules and regulations are beneficial, they have incentives to adopt them. Now, the advantage, I think, of a system of private regulation like this is it allows the New York Stock Exchange, who was competing with the consolidated stock exchange back in the 19th century, to say, here, invest here. We have better rules and regulations than our competitors. And the system of competition allowed people to figure out different ways of providing assurances for investors. So I think just as competition's good in other markets, it's good for stock exchanges as well. This enabled all of the world's first markets: Amsterdam, London, New York. And it didn't work just for a few years. It worked for hundreds of years. System of private rules and regulations. And that made many great things possible. It made possible the Industrial Revolution, international trade, and modern markets possible. So the Dutch Golden Age, if people are art buffs, you can look at all these things in the Dutch Golden Age. There's some great art where they were painting pictures of everyday people and merchants rather than just of royalty. They expanded trade all over the world. They created a large amount of international commerce. And when Henry Hudson went to the royals and said, I want to find a way to get to, he was trying to get to Asia through the Northwest Passage. They said, no, we're not going to finance you. So he went to the East India Company, the Dutch East India Company, even though it was from England, and they financed his voyage to New York. The North River was discovered by Henry Hudson, now it's the Hudson River, by the Dutch East India Company funded voyage. Shortly after that, New Amsterdam, this place that we've heard of before, was founded by the Dutch West India Company. This was a trading port. And one of my favorite books on this is Russell Shorto's Island at the Center of the World. It's in the bookstore. And he argues that New York was more economically tolerant and religiously tolerant because of the Dutch heritage, because these people were interested in making money above other things, less interested in regulating your personal lives. So this was founded by stock markets, by the Dutch West India Company. In England, lots of things that we take for granted today were financed by corporations. In the United States as well. The railroad booms, the mining booms. So seeing the expansion of industry all over the U.S. was largely financed by investments in the New York Stock Exchange. And that led to increases in factories and production of all different products. So my own personal takeaways from all of this, I think that we need to highlight a little bit more to the public about the benefits of markets in general and try and prevent some of this scapegoating that we often see in the press to say that Wall Street's the cause of all problems, financial markets the cause of all problems. And then point out that markets have done great things for the world, and they actually have done a great job regulating themselves. So I think that we can look back in history and learn from some of their solutions in the past and see if they can help innovate more in the future as they have been. And this has tremendous benefits for the world as well. This is a picture everybody's probably seen, but just in the past few years, past few decades, the global poverty rate is decreasing dramatically because of markets. This is a picture from a few years ago. This is the adoption rate of different technologies in the United States, just electricity, refrigeration, air conditioning. Over time, markets produce things for so many people, and they make the modern world possible, and they make New York City possible. So I will end with this quote from Voltaire. In addition to making commerce possible, in addition to making modern products possible, markets also have the ability to bring people together from different backgrounds, different perspectives. Voltaire was talking about the London Stock Exchange here, and I think it's a nice quote. He says, "Go into the exchange, that place more venerable than many a court, and you'll see representatives of all the nations assembled for the profit of mankind. There the Jew, the Mohammedan, and the Christian deal with one another as if they were the same religion, and reserve the name of infidel for those who go bankrupt." So, thank you very much.